phase of who? Third
The Dick Cheney radio show. You called him on air and you asked the most important question. Not do you believe in UFOs, not something generic like that. But I'm going to let you go ahead and tell a story. What was it that you asked him that really stuck in my head more than anything?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, if you do get a high star, like a 4-star general of the Unified Command who will know what's going on, or a president, or maybe even a vice president, you don't want to ask them whether they've seen a UFO. You don't want to ask them what they think about UFOs because they'll just walk around the question. The question you want to know is the briefing question. And that means if you're a high-level official, at some point, if you are read in, somebody's going to come into your office, they're going to swear you to secrecy, and they're going to tell you what's actually going on. That's the truth. That's what the government actually knows. It's the briefing. So what I asked Cheney, because Cheney had been Secretary of Defense under Bush Sr., he had been Chief of Staff for President Gerald Ford, and when I talked to him, he was actually in the White House. He was the Vice President. This was April of 2000 and... was it 2001, and he had just been in the office, Oval Office, for let's see, it came in January, so this is April the 11th this happened, and basically the rumors were going around that Cheney was running the show, that Bush was just following instructions, and the host, who was Diana Rehm from the public radio in Washington, actually asked him, are you running the show? And he said, no, I'm not running the show. And so I asked him the briefing question. I said, in all your jobs in government, Mr. Cheney, have you ever been briefed on the subject of UFOs? If so, when was it, and what were you told? And he paused. He was caught off guard. I guess he'd never faced this question before. And he said, if I had been briefed on that subject, it would probably be classified, and I wouldn't be talking about it. And then Diana Rehm stepped in, and she said, Mr. Vice President, have you had any meetings on UFOs since you got to the White House? And by then he'd sort of caught his ground, and he said, no, I've had no UFO meetings since I got to the White House. And then the next 5 questions were all about Halliburton, about him ripping off Halliburton and all this sort of stuff. And I don't think he ever appeared on a radio talk show after that. I think it was the last one he ever went on, because he was so shocked at the questions that he came under attack, and he figured he's the big vice president. But basically he said what I define as the number one thing. If you're looking at disclosure and you're looking at the cover-up, that's the number one reason that I say there is a cover-up, and it is basically the fact that if you're U.S. military, you classify everything, and you basically assume that we're the good guys, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Chinese, Russians, they're all evil, and we have to control the information, and therefore they just classify it, and it's almost like the element of surprise, what's called lead time in weapon technology. That if you have, for example, in World War II, if you have you drop the atomic bomb, of course, all the Japanese generals run to the emperor and say, they just dropped this bomb and they killed, 125,000 people. What are we going to do? And of course, the emperor will say, well, build a bomb and we'll drop it on them. And how long is this going to take? And they say, well, about 6 or 8 years, probably. You haven't got 6 or 8 years. So that's what this whole thing is about. This is what Cheney was talking about, the fact that it's classified, and they really don't care what anybody thinks about it. We're the military. We know better. We're here to protect the people, and therefore we're going to keep it secret because it gives us the element of surprise, and we're not going to give it away to our enemies. And a number of other people have sort of been asked the question, and basically it's confirmed that there are people who know. For example, we asked General Wesley Clark, who was a 4-star general with the Unified Command, who was the head of NATO forces in Europe, and he had gone on the campaign trail in 2004 for the Democrats, and at one point was actually winning the Democratic nomination for president. And he went into New Hampshire, and Jay Buckley, who was a space shuttle astronaut, asked him the question, General Clark, what's your vision for space? And it was at that point that Wesley Clark went into this rant about the fact, I believe we can go past the speed of light. I've argued with physicists about this. I believe we can do it. And it was like, wow. And he had wanted to be an astronaut, and because his eyesight was no good, he'd gone into the Army and had become this 4-star general. And so, of course, the question that I tried to get across to a number of researchers in the United States as he was running, because in the early part of a presidential campaign, when they're doing the open houses or the sort of the town houses in like Iowa and New Hampshire, they will actually take questions. When it gets later in the campaign, then they have all sorts of ways to avoid questions. They don't want to say anything stupid, and they're sort of protecting their lead. But this was in New Hampshire, so it was one of the first states of the primaries, and I couldn't get anybody. It was very surprising that, a lot of people say, we want disclosure, we want something to happen. I could not get a lot of the MUFON state directors. I said, he's coming to your state. He's going to be taking questions. I want you to ask him the briefing question that I asked Dick Cheney. Ask him, you talked about the fact that we could go past the speed of light. You believed we could do it. And ask him the question, have you been briefed on the subject of UFOs? And nobody would ask the question. And it didn't happen until 2 days before the end of the campaign. Kerry had won the nomination to run against Bush. And it was 2 days before the end of the campaign. He was campaigning for Kerry. He was in Reno, Nevada. And a friend of mine, Dr. David Rudiak from outside of Berkeley, California, a very sharp researcher, had one chance before and had done the same thing as everybody else. He said, well, I really don't know if I want to really embarrass him. And I was saying to researchers, I said, well, I mean, if we're not going to stand up and ask this question, you can't expect the media to stand up and ask the question or expect somebody else to do it. This is our job. This is what we're here for. And if we're embarrassed, everybody else is going to be embarrassed as well. This is our job. So he had one chance before. He didn't ask the question, but he was in Reno, Nevada, happened to be there and saw that he was going to campaign. Figured I'll ask him the question. So at the end of the lecture that he was giving, he said to him, General Clark, when you were in New Hampshire, you said you believed we could go past the speed of light. I have a question for you, General Clark. Have you ever been briefed on the subject of UFOs? And he said, General Clark looked down like he was a kid that had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And he was sort of very embarrassed. And he looked up and he said, I know a bit. In fact, I'm going to Roswell tonight. And we checked the schedule, and he actually was. Because what happens in the campaign, and you will see a lot of presidential campaigns and a lot of presidents will go to Roswell, New Mexico. They'll go there and make a speech because New Mexico is often a swing state. It's only got 5 electoral votes, but a lot of times they'll go Republican or Democrat. So at the end of every campaign, you'll see a lot of the campaign people show up in New Mexico to try to grab those 5 electoral votes. So it was true that he was going to Roswell the very next day. He said, I know some. In fact, I'm going to Roswell tonight. And that was when Dr. Rudiak was not fooled. He realized, go back with the question. So he said, so you were briefed. And he said, I know some stuff, but we have to work on our higher mathematics. And that is something that has come up from a number of different people, one of them being the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, who was Ben Rich, who in March of 1993 made this famous speech to the alumni engineering people from UCLA, where he said, we've discovered the mistake in the equation. We now have the technology to take ET home. And so General Clark was basically stating the very same thing, the fact that the mathematics has got something to do with this mystery. So that's what I encourage people to do. If you want disclosure, if you want this thing out, especially the campaign is about to start, you're going to have Hillary Clinton, who's extremely interested in UFOs, who's already been in Iowa once, who will be in New Hampshire. She'll be in Iowa, and she will be taking questions at these town halls. And I think it's incumbent upon somebody to stand up and ask her. And I can provide the documents that show that Hillary Clinton was involved with UFOs in an effort to get President Bill Clinton to disclose in 1993. We have 2 very direct documents that I provided to Fox News. I provided them to the Washington Post, and I provided them to Associated Press last time that Hillary ran, and they would not run the story. They had the documents, but they would not touch the story. But if we have this situation, I will provide people the documents that show quite clearly that Hillary was involved in UFOs. In fact, when Lawrence Rockefeller in 1993 went to the president, tried to get to the president, he was cut off at the pass by the science advisor. And it was at that level that they tried to deal with his demands for disclosure. And he said, I want disclosure. And if I don't get it, I will put a major ad in every major newspaper in the United States of America asking the president to disclose UFOs. And they knew that Rockefeller had the money. So they said, no, Mr. Rockefeller, hang on, we'll do what you want to do. And what do you want to do? And it was Lawrence Rockefeller who actually put out the demand that the U.S. Air Force reinvestigate Roswell. That's why they did it in 1994 and also in 1997. It wasn't because they wanted to go back and reinvestigate Roswell. They were under pressure. It was Lawrence Rockefeller who had forced the U.S. Air Force to reinvestigate, and the green light was given by Bill Clinton to go and reinvestigate. So it does help to put pressure on